Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to another edition of Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to those who messaged me during last week. We did get your messages, and we received them with kindness. People were asking because what we did last week, Friday. For those of you who are now coming up to speed, we brought to you a rebroadcast of that program where the Minister of Citizenship is still calling on that media house to issue an apology because of the blatant lies that they told. So we decided to bring that back to you last week so people can be reminded that, look, these things are still happening. Earlier, when I spoke with the minister early in the week, he still has not gotten that apology. So I guess that is up in the air as it relates to that, because now the media, the mainstream media, and of course, I always remind you, I don't come here and attack the media. What I do is plead with them to report the truth and to report the facts. But of course, everyone else is focusing on another thing. Usually I would give you a recap on what happened this week, but the biggest story, the biggest news this week is that His Excellency President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Brigadier David Granger, has announced that general and regional elections, obviously, will be on the 2nd of March 2019, even though yesterday a certain media house of course, obviously, when he was called out on it, he said it was a mistake. I can only take his word for him. His headline read the 2nd of May. And sometimes I'm wondering, what is it? What are you trying to do to the population and the nation? So he issued, I can give him this, he issued an apology saying that it was a mistake. But journalists and people in general, please be careful. Again, the president has said that the date for our general and regional elections is the 2nd of March 2020. I think I said 2019 just now, but obviously that date would have gone by 2020. And this goes for everybody, people out there who are trying to twist his words, and it is not definitive, and it is not that, and we're playing with words, and we're playing with the English language. That is what the president said, and that is what we will go by. Because that is what he said, and he has been saying it over and over again. He can only name a date when GCOM indicates to him that they're ready, and GCOM has done that, and therefore he has made his statement. So I'm going to sit back now and see how many other ways that people can try to twist his words and try to back him into a corner. I don't know why they thought that they would have been successful in doing that. Remember, this government was elected. It's not a fly-by-night, just put yourself there government. They were elected and they're there legally. But that's enough of that for now. Today, and those of you who follow me on social media, I announced this earlier today, that my conversation would be with Mr. Rawle Lucas, who is the chairman of the Guyana Power and Light Inc. And I am happy to have him on this program for the first time, not under very pleasant circumstances. Of course, viewers, I'm one of the persons who beat up on GPL. You do it all the time because we get angry whenever we get these blackouts, especially when they're unscheduled. I thought it fair to have Mr. Lucas to come here and talk, because we say all kinds of things, especially when we're not in a system and we don't fully understand all of the challenges. So I thought it fair to Mr. Lucas. Of course, it's not him alone. It's an entire team. It's an entire company. So we brought him to represent the company and talk to us here on Facing the Nation today about GPL and some of his problems. Also, we'll touch a bit on the economy, because Mr. Lucas is also a columnist and much more than that, but he has a lot of knowledge on economies and growth and so on. So, but we're first going to begin with GPL. Rawle Lucas, welcome to Facing the Nation.
Thank you very much, Malika.
All right, great to have you. We are going to jump. I see you did a thing because you're not really sure, but I'm telling you it's great. We're going to jump right into the discussion. Now, the fact is that the viewers out there, we think and we know that there are a lot of things that are wrong with that are wrong with GPL. But I think people are tired of hearing, oh, we're working to fix this problem. We're doing this, we're doing that. So even while you say to people today that, look, we're working to fix these problems, I'd like you to give an insight on some of the why some of the things that are happening at GPL and, of course, obviously affecting the general population. I'd like you to talk about that. But viewers, I must also indicate to you, he had a lengthy speech recently, lengthy meaning not weary speech, but a lengthy speech about some of the things. And I think this is, there was a stakeholder meeting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. you stressed a lot on stakeholders. Stakeholders meaning basically all of Guyana. Why is it important at this juncture, even though people seem to be wary about the services GPL is offering? Why is it important at this juncture to involve almost everyone in terms of improving GPL?
Well, thanks, Malika, for that question. One of the things we need to recognize is that GPL is a company, it's a private company, but it is owned by the government.
Okay.
And if we accept that our elected government is a government of the people, then it means that GPL is the property of the people.
Okay.
And so, in my view, I think it is important that we at GPL, certainly it's the view of our board, that we should be talking with our customers, with our stakeholders, to ensure that they understand what it is we're trying to do for them, and so that they could probably even advise us on some of the things that we ought to do that would make life different for them. So I think that is important to recognize. The other thing I think it is important for us to recognize at this stage is that GPL is not responsible for providing electricity throughout the length and breadth of Guyana. As we would have indicated at the stakeholders' engagement,
Yes.
GPL actually has the responsibility of providing electricity from regions 2 through region 7. Which means, therefore, that there are at least 4 other regions which are not being supplied with electricity by GPL. They are being supplied with electricity by other companies that are owned by the government. And so, GPL has no responsibility for that. So even if you hear of experiences in, for example, Region 1 or Region 8 or Region 9 or even Region 10, that's not GPL's fault. That's not, GPL is not a cause of that. So I think it is very important for people to understand that.
So then, I'm asking him also, some of you might know, Mr. Lucas is also a lecturer at the University of Guyana. So I'm asking you now to put on your teaching cap here. So is it fair to say then that it's not fair to describe GPL as a monopoly? Is it a monopoly?
No. I think GPL is a monopoly. It's a monopoly because the market in which it is serving, regions 2 to 7, it's the only supplier.
All right.
It's the major supplier, so it's the only player in town. And of course, monopolies tend to look after their own interests,
Yes.
and not necessarily the interests of their customers.
Yes.
And that is usually reflected in the prices that they charge, so that they can make as much money as possible. But GPL doesn't have that luxury, actually. GPL, in spite of its monopoly position, also has the requirement of ensuring that electricity is available to all who can access it and at an affordable rate, which means that GPL cannot adopt the same attitude that a typical monopoly would adopt in a market that it controls.
Okay.
However, I must admit, GPL displays its monopoly behavior in a different way. And that is usually reflected, unfortunately, in the way in which customers are treated. That has become a challenge. So I can tell you that one of the first things the board did when it got there was to ensure that management understood that the board was putting its customers first, nothing else. If our customers cannot be satisfied, then it means GPL is not doing its work. So as it stands right now, the standard that we have set, the goal that we have set, is no blackouts.
Okay, before we even go on to that, because I know that that is also leading to some other things. what would you say, and it might be a strange question for me to ask the chair of GPL at this point, what would you say to people, because this is one of our go-to, this Guyanese. The first thing we jump and say, man, look, the government need to find a way to break this monopoly. What would you say to people who would say that to you? Break the monopoly and let's move on. Why is that? Why would that be an easy task or a difficult task at this time for it, so that the people can understand?
Well, I think what we need to recognize is, if you took a look at what GPL is, GPL is a full-service company, meaning that it provides service in all three areas that are important for the supply of electricity: in generation, in transmission, and in the distribution.
Yeah.
Now, the kind of expenditure that is required to provide all of those services is not a simple one. It's a very costly thing. The capital expenditure is very high, and therefore it might not necessarily be in the best interest of private entrepreneurs to move in that direction. The second thing you have to look at is the size of the market. Even though you may be able to operate in an area that has a reasonable customer base, the fact that you might not be able to recover your investments within a reasonable period of time may very well discourage people from entering. So that is part of the reason why government, as it were, at this particular point in time, is the principal provider of electricity in this country.
All right. One of the things you made mention, and I think, and viewers, you would recall that a few weeks ago we spoke with the Minister of Public Infrastructure on this very program. And of course, he did not go into so much detail, but he talked about the Demerara-Berbice Interconnected System, DBIS. And of course, viewers, let me let you know that I'm also learning as we go along here. The minister briefly talked about that. I would like you to give some details, because apparently this is the system that is proving to be challenging, especially in Region 4, because it seems, I mean, we're not everywhere, but it seems that most of the problems occur in this part of our country. Let's talk about that system.
Yeah. Well, the way in which GPL provides its service is in Region 2, parts of Region 3, and in Region 7. They have what we call standalone systems. So whatever generating facility you have, for example, in Bartica is for Bartica alone.
Oh.
What you have in Leg 1 is for Leg 1 alone. What you have in Wakenham is for Wakenham alone. And what you have in Anna Regina is for the coast of the Essequibo. So they are independent, standalone facilities. Demerara and Berbice are connected into a single grid system. Now, as far as I know, Demerara, West Demerara, which is part of Region 3, is connected through the 69 kV line, which was damaged, that lies across the Demerara River.
Yes, this is, okay.
Right. But there's another 69 kV line, I think, that lies somewhere across the Berbice River that enables us to connect Berbice to the Demerara system. And therefore, you know, we are able to have this interconnected system. Now, part of our problem, of course, is as we think of our customers, we have to think of all three phases of the service that GPL provides. It provides generation, and right now our generation capacity is really not sufficient to provide the sort of reliability that we want and to guarantee that we could keep the lights on, GPL could keep the lights on all the time.
And this is generation capacity.
And this is generation capacity. We have a lot of, as you would have been told at the stakeholder system, we have a lot of aged capacity in the system right now.
I'd like you to just be specific. So again, people can understand. When you say age, give me a timeline.
We have plants that have been laid since sometime, engines that have been late since sometime in the 70s, in the
70s.
80s and 90s. So you have some engines that are over 40 years old and that sort of thing, which would not be able to give us the same reliability that newer engines would be able to do. So generation is indeed a very important element for us. And if you were at the stakeholders conference engagement, you would have heard the management of GPL tell you that they have a program. They have a program in place in which they're working to ensure that they can bring the generating capacity up to speed.
I know they have there are two other aspects of providing electricity that you'll touch on, but I'm happy that you talked about the stakeholders forum. I don't know if you can briefly discuss it here, because the next question would be, does GPL have the money, the finances, to improve the generation capacity?
Well, we don't have all of the money, I can say that to you. But what I want to emphasize here is indeed to ensure that we can get to where we need to be with our generation. I have asked the chairperson of our technical committee from the board to monitor and manage the development and implementation of our generation program. So we are not taking this lightly. We intend to make sure that what GPL has promised is delivered, so that our customers can be satisfied that that they can get the kind of electricity supply that they're looking for. We, at least I am not interested in anything else. I've made it clear, I think the board has made it clear, and I have to admit that the GPL management has accepted that our goal must be no blackouts. They've accepted it, and I know they have begun to work towards that. It's not going to be an easy endeavor, primarily because we are talking about capital investments, which have to go through all the required processes, including our procurement processes and so forth. We have to, in some cases, find external funding in order to acquire the kinds of equipment and assets that we need in order to make it happen. So it's going to take a little time, but I can tell you we are focused on it as like a laser beam. We are focused on it.
All right, great. And viewers, remember, we're still on and yes, viewers, I have to refer to my notes here because, again, a lot of this is new language for me too. It's the DBIS system, the Demerara Barbies Interconnected System. And as Mr. Lucas did mention, even while he was addressing the forum, that this is the most challenging system for GPL at this point. But other than generation, I know there are two, I'm not sure if I'm getting this correct, but there are two other components of providing electricity. I'd like you to talk about those two components.
We also have the transmission and distribution part. Essentially what happens is the generating station generates the electricity, and then it has to be taken somewhere. And just like you would pick up a passenger from the airport and take them to their destination, GPL has to pick up the electricity and take it to the customer's home. But the electricity that comes out of the generating station is high voltage, 69,000 kV, 13,000 kV, and so forth. And that, none of us could work with that in our homes. So it goes to their substations, it is broken down into low voltages, and then it is sent through the distribution system to people's houses at voltages that we can use. So the transmission and distribution part, you can think of the transmission lines that you see running overhead as a highway, a road. And in the same way that we have to build and maintain our roads, we have to build and maintain those transmission lines. And so there are times when we have to, bring those transmission lines, de-energize them so that people can work on them, ensure that they have the lifespan that is required and the efficiency or efficacy, I should say, that is required. They have to. So sometimes we experience the blackouts, and part of that reason is we don't have the redundant lines, transmission lines, that we can pull down one, put one on,
And the,
stop using one and use another one while they work on improving, repairing, maintaining whatever it is they have to do with those lines. We don't have that in the system as yet.
in viewers, in essence, if you touch one thing, that is how an entire, where one problem occurs, the entire area get blackouts. Am I not correct?
That's basically what can happen. Because these lines are so important to the supply of electricity throughout the system, the Demerara-Barbizon connected system. People need to understand that when we have to fix something on a line, sometimes we have to take down a lot of people in order to do so. But we are working towards improving that.
As we speak again, and I have to represent the people here, they're hearing a lot of things, they're hearing the problems, they're hearing also solutions coming from you, but the bottom line is always, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, and I know it's an entire team that is working. The bottom line is somebody's going to ask me, so really tell me when they expect these blackouts. And this is just speaking the language
No,
of we
well,
speak.
I
When
mean,
are
as
they?
I said, if you are already short in your generating supply, then you will experience blackouts.
Yes.
Especially if something happens with a generating plant, or at least one of the engines in the generating plant, you will have some inconvenience. But we have already done some things that
Yes.
will change that. I know that the press has written about the express feeder line that runs now from the Vredenhoop station to an area called Friesland on the west bank of the Demerara River.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if people understand what a game changer that has been for the people in the West Dem area. A couple of things used to happen when we had one line. On that one line, which stretched, told about 16 kilometers, it meant that as the electricity, as the voltage went along, it decreased in strength and so
Understood.
forth. So a number of people in the lower end of that area suffered low voltage. And therefore, you had the attendant problems that are associated with low voltage. If GPL had to do any work, or if any part of that line was disrupted, it meant the entire area was brought down. That has changed because GPL has now run from about the middle of June. They ran an express feeder line, which now, given the way in which they have configured it, has reduced significantly the low voltage problem in that area. And it now provides some redundancy so that if they have to work on one line, people's electricity will not be disrupted because there's a second line that can take care of.
Okay.
In addition to that, what it has done is, given the configuration, it has now isolated areas so that a problem in one area prior to this express line being run brought down the whole system. But now, if there's a problem in a particular area, only that area will be affected. The rest of the customers will not be affected. So that has happened. We also intend to do the same thing on the East Demerara side, on this side of the river, our side of the river.
Yes.
Where we're looking to provide some redundancy from Kingston to Sophia, so that some of the benefits that are now being seen in the West Dem area will come to our area. So we're actually trying to do things that are within our...
Right, you're not just sitting
We're
waiting
not just
for
sitting
finances.
waiting. No, we're doing things that we can do, that we have control over, to ensure that we begin to improve the process. We
All right.
begin to improve the service to the people of this country.
One of the things I know that you can certainly do to begin to improve the services and so on to the people, and it has been all over the news recently, but and this is another one of the reasons I really wanted you to come on. I don't think people understand the importance of that and how it would work, which is sourcing electricity from private citizens. We had the big thing in the newspaper about Giftland, and again, people sometimes these days, people read one phrase, one statement, and they go off. Talk about the importance of that and how will it work, that it's not just gift land, it's basically sourcing from private citizens.
Right. Well, let me tell you, when my board met for the very first time,
Yes.
we addressed, of course, the issue of generation shortfall. And we did ask the question, how can we deal with this? And the way in which we considered the matter was to divide up our time period into 4, so that we would understand, how and why we must make certain decisions. And so we have what we consider to be an urgent or immediate time period, which is like now. Then we had our short-term time period, our medium-term, and our long-term. And the board agreed that electricity generation is so critical that we have to look right now as to what it is we must do to ensure that we can at least begin to alleviate that situation. And so brought before us was the suggestion, the proposal from Giftland to sell some power to GPL. And in considering the matter, the board looked at the possible opportunities that perhaps could arise if other persons were out there who might have some excess generation capacity to supply to the grid. And it is in that context we decided to move forward with what we call the distributed generation arrangement, which is basically generating power from sources that are close to where the power will be supplied. So, for example, you have solar panels on your roof. That the purpose of the solar panels is to generate electricity for your house. But if there's an excess, then we have to find a way of getting it to the grid. That also goes for persons who might have small wind turbines where they could get electricity from as well. If that exists, we can do it. You also have even persons with standby generators.
They can also provide, wow.
That is also considered part of distributive generation.
But it's not a road that GPL would necessarily...
Well, it's our, as I said, we're looking at immediate or urgent, and then we're looking at short-term, medium-term, and long-term.
Okay.
So our thing was, if there are persons out there right now who think they can supply, then please proceed.
So...
That's essentially what we're saying. We're not shutting out our stakeholders. If our customers, have a way of making the system work better, then we welcome it. We're not going to shut anybody out. This is very important. I mean, electricity generation is almost like your lifeblood, If you don't have electricity, look at what happens to our economy. The estimate that I have been given is that we lose $1.50 for every kilowatt hour that we cannot supply. Yeah. Right. And that is significant, for a small economy like ours that needs to keep churning out goods and services so that people can have a good life, as we say.
Viewers, if you're now tuning in, this is Facing the Nation. Today we're talking with Chairman Chairman of GPL, Chairman Lucas, Chairman Rawle Lucas. Obviously, when you hear GPL, there are a number of things to discuss and a number of things to get to. Coming up a little later on in the program, he'll also be shedding some light and his knowledge on the growth of Guyana's economy in the last 4 or 5 years or so. He'll be telling you a bit about that. But for now, we're going to stay on GPL. Now, Chairman Lucas, one of the things that Guyanese complain about is incompetence and what we also call negligence. Earlier, in your sentiments, you talked about the KV line. Again, viewers, all of this new language for me. Some of us are out of our depth here, but you talked about the KV line. This was a few months ago. It was damaged, and again, you can correct me as I go along here, because the line that was damaged and caused so many problems in so many areas and communities, it was not buried. The heartrending thing, it was not properly buried after being constructed again, or whatever word you use for it. The heartrending thing about that is that I read that that cable was commissioned in February of 2015.
No. I think it was since sometime in 2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Imagine, but it was commissioned in 2012, in February of 2012. And it was damaged recently, so it was just lying there with and I made to understand that it being buried properly is supposed to be a procedure. What happened from 2012 to when it was damaged? Why was it not properly buried? I don't understand that. And again, it's costing what the company already does not have.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't speak for those who were before me, but obviously, in 2012, whoever took the final decision probably didn't pay enough attention to the seriousness of protecting such a valuable asset of the organization, and one which was supposed to play such an important role in the interconnected system. It is rather unfortunate that the cable was allowed to remain exposed as it was to river traffic, to the vagaries of our currents, which apparently moved thing up and down. So even though there might have been navigational aids to allow ship operators to see what's going on, there might have been some other challenges. My concern is that we are now, and this is another action that we're taking to make sure that we minimize blackouts. My board has decided we must bury the entire length of the cable.
And that process has begun.
Yeah, you see, that cable has been put at a location that really and truly most experts would tell you should not have been there. The cable that I'm told that lies across the Berbice River was not put at the mouth of the Berbice River. It was put way down, the river, deep into the river area, so that it didn't experience this kind of thing that we're experiencing now.
This now leads me to another question, because I asked about this cable and why it wasn't hidden. Obviously, in fairness, viewers, and for those of you who are going to sit at home and say he can't even answer why it wasn't, understand that this chairman was not, we were talking about since 2012. I said 2015, he corrected me, since 2012. The problem with this now I'm going to also go further. GPL has many other problems. Is it a case that some of the problems that we're experiencing now, is it fair to say that we've inherited them from maybe 10, 6 years ago? Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. A lot of the actions that should have been taken have not been taken. And I can tell you, I want to be able to say that one of the things that we sometimes ignore in all of this is our staff. The staff at GPL, we might think of them in different ways, some kind, not so kind. But I have had the privilege of visiting a number of our locations and meeting with staff members and talking to them about some of the things that could be done better by the organization to make sure that our electricity supply remains as reliable as possible. And one of the things I will tell you is, in speaking to our staff, particularly in the transmission and distribution area, the risks that they take just to make sure that the system stays afloat are phenomenal. These people sometimes have to traverse waters chest high in order to get to a location to fix a problem. These people sometimes have to, be aware of snakes in order to do their work. These people sometimes, because they might not have the right kind of equipment, they have to improvise, and sometimes it puts them at risk in order to ensure that we have lights on. So it is not as simple as it looks. But what troubles me is that, these things have been allowed to go on for such a long time without really and truly paying attention to the situation of the staff. And so this board has made it quite clear that while generation and transmission and distribution, those assets are important, the staff is the most important thing for us. Because without them, there are lots of things that will not happen. And as long as I'm there, we will address their needs.
Not to rain on your parade, and I'm happy that we're getting these sentiments from you. One might, a provocative person might ask, again, and this is Guyanese, unfortunately this is our culture, because as much as we're complaining that GPL doing this wrong, the wrong, and you're trying to say that you're working to fix these problems, you might hear somebody ask you a question, a provocateur of course. What make you think you could come now and fix it when it wasn't being fixed all along? How would you respond to that?
Well, I would tell them that I can't fix it in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. You have to give us time. But you also have to hold us accountable. And I'm quite prepared to have people hold me accountable. If I can't get it done, then let me go my way. Otherwise, I will do it.
Okay.
It's as simple as that for me.
Before we move on to another important topic, obviously, which is our economy and its state and its growth in recent times, one of the things I am happy that you began by talking about the importance of the human resources at GPL. One of the things I know you've been busy doing lately is several site visits, and I know you observe things and so on. I am not sure that complaint is still happening the way it used to happen before, but one of the problems we had is customer service, staff this, they don't know how to talk to people. And I just want to know from you, to get an idea from you, some of the things that you would have discovered, and if you think they're up to par or need bettering as you did all of these site visits. And of course, with that, anything else that you may want to talk about regarding GPL that I may have missed.
Well, I perhaps am not the best person to talk about the technical issues and so forth, but all I can tell you is this, and perhaps this might be the final bit I should say on it.
On it.
With respect to customer service, I can tell you the chairman of our commercial committee has already begun to delve into these matters that affect customers.
Okay.
Issues relating to meters, issues relating to the management of people's accounts, the responsiveness. He's already begun to delve into these matters. So I'm anticipating that we will begin to see improvements in how things are done. And in relation to our staff, it's my intention to. I've already spoken to the chairperson of our technical committee, but I will also be speaking with the chairperson of our remuneration and human resource committee to ensure that we continue to monitor and pursue those issues that will make a difference in the ability of staff to help GPL deliver the kind of services that people expect of the organization.
So in other words, those site visits have been beneficial and fruitful.
They have been very beneficial, and we intend to work on the issues that have been raised by staff members.
Perfect. All right, we're going to leave our conversation on GPL there for now. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, of course, you missed a big chunk of the conversation, but I always remind you that before the end of the day, it will be loaded to both my YouTube channel and Facebook page. But now I'm going to ask the chairman of GPL's board to put on another hat, which is not only his lecturing hat at the University of Guyana. I'm proud to say that I've been a product, of his, even though, and the viewers out there know me by now. You know I'm not an economics and a numbers, figures, and an accounting girl, but I try, and you have to try when you have no choice. I'm going to ask him to talk a bit about the economy, and one of the reasons I'm asking him to do this too, for those of you who read a lot, especially our dailies, you would recall a number of articles, when I say recently, maybe sometime last year rolling into this year, a number of articles where Mr. Lucas talked about Guyana's economy, and he really and truly spoke about the growth of Guyana's economy. And I thought it necessary for us to have this discussion also because, again, there's so much negative rhetoric out there. And for people like me, there are many more persons out there like me who don't necessarily pay attention to numbers and figures. Some people don't even understand. And this is not knocking people. This is just the reality. This is just life. Some people don't even understand the GDP, things like GDP. And they say, listen, this is not my area. Let me just listen to the expert. The unfortunate thing with that is that anybody can come and tell you anything, and if they show you something on a paper that seems to be evidence and proof, you believe it. So comparisons and these things are necessary. And Mr. Lucas wrote several articles talking about the growth of Guyana's economy. I want to talk about that because the other thing too is that when we hear Guyana's economy and what we're exporting and what we're getting money from, we think only rice and sugar. We become narrow-minded, and we know what happened with the conversation about sugar and the closure of this estate and that, but of course that part of it is another conversation. Why should a person, when focusing on economic growth and so on, not only focus on things like rice and sugar? And again, viewers, the question may be a bit bland, but he's capable of breaking it down for us. Why not only rice and sugar? What other areas we should look at? Or I should ask you, what other areas have you factored in? Because I know you have come to a definitive conclusion that we have seen economic growth in the last 4 years, maybe 3. Let's talk about that.
Well, you're asking why not rice and sugar alone?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the simple answer is not all of us are into rice and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us do other things. Some of us drive taxis, minibuses.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us work in financial institutions. We sell insurance. We sell mortgages. Some of us do construction.
Mm-hmm.
So our economy is more than rice and sugar. And I think it's important for people to understand that. Essentially what happens is a country like Guyana follows the international standard classification of its economy. And we have generally 4, which are agriculture, and agriculture is paired or joined with fishing and forestry.
Okay.
And then we have manufacturing, we have mining, and mining is paired with quarrying, and then of course we have services. Now the largest part of our economy is actually services.
Okay.
Even though we hear about rice and sugar a lot and gold, the largest part of our economy is made up of the set of services that we all engage in, whether it is transportation, whether it is the retail business, the wholesale and retail business, whether it is warehousing, storing stuff, whether it is information and communication technology, tourism. You have a number of parts that make up, or industries as we would say, that make up the services sector in Guyana.
Right.
And the services sector, if we were to throw electricity and construction with it, it would be about 63% of the economy.
Of the economy.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's where a lot of our people actually get their work done, get their employment, get things going. It's in the services
So
sector.
once that sector is up and running, we should see some sort of continuous growth.
Right. And, there's some parts of it that are more dynamic and more active than others. And you could imagine at least one of the areas that would be very dynamic would be the wholesale and retail trade, because we're always buying and, things to eat, to entertain ourselves and that sort of stuff. And then, of course, there's transportation. We're always moving. We move a lot in this country. We don't realize it. And so what you should understand then is the services sector is the largest. The second largest is agriculture, but it's only about 16%. The third largest is mining and quarrying, which is about 15%. And manufacturing, which is the last, is just about 6 or 7% of the economy. It's a small part of the economy.
Okay.
Now, but when you look, the biggest industry in Guyana is not anything in agriculture. It's not rice, it's not sugar, or any of those things. It is the wholesale and retail trade. It's the largest industry in Guyana. And then you have closely behind that, I think, construction.
And you're saying your argument is that, and viewers, I'm using the word argument again because we've all seen this. Again, another word there. We've all seen the discussion, and it came from so many, where in the private sector, out of the private sector, talking about the doom and gloom of Guyana's economy. And we've heard this rhetoric in the last 2 years. And viewers, to go on the political side of it, this is even before that the passing of that no confidence motion. Well, of course, we all know what happened after that. But you've been hearing that the economy is in a slump, it's a doom and gloom economy. Now you're saying all of this, which means that there was growth based on some of the things that you're saying.
Well, yeah.
How would you like to clarify?
I think one of the best things for people to do is because it's one of the easier accessible documents, is the annual report of the Bank of Guyana. If you go to that annual report, there are some tables at the back of it. The tables of interest for what we are talking about are tables 10.1 and tables 10.2. Table 10.1 tells us what we call our nominal GDP, or at current prices, meaning that basically tells us what has been happening in the economy, and we link it with our prices. So it gives you something of a value of the activities in the economy. Table 10.2 gives you what we would consider to be the physical output of the economy, the real economy, the goods and services that you can actually buy with what money that you have today in the economy. That's what Table 10.2 tells you. If you were to look at Table 10.2, because that's the one that matters, you will see that every industry in this country has grown since 2015. Every industry has grown since 2015. And I had done an article a few weeks back in which I tried to make a comparison between the performance of the economy under the first 4 years of President Granger and the performance of the economy under the first 4 elected years of President Jagdeo. President Jagdeo was elected in 2001 and President Granger was elected in 2015. And I showed the performance of the economy. I don't recall the numbers right now, but during President Jagdeo's first 4 years as an elected leader of this country, I don't think the economy ever got to 2% growth. It never grew 2%.
I know you don't have the numbers, but of course, viewers, because I have the article, and I'd like Mr. Lucas to be able to give you these numbers so you would understand clearly
Right. Well,
what
okay.
he's talking about.
In 2001, which is Mr. Jagdio's first year as an elected leader, the economy grew 1.9%. In Mr. Granger's first year in 2015, the economy grew 3.2%. In 2002, which was the second year of President Jagdio's elected office, the economy grew 1.1%. It didn't go up, it came down. In 2016, the economy grew 3.3%. In 2003, the economy didn't grow at all. It actually contracted. It lost output. Guyanese lost output. In 2017, even though the economy did not grow as fast as it did in 2016, it nonetheless grew positively. It added at least 2% more to the economy. Unlike in the case of President Jagdio, when it actually declined, it actually contracted. We actually lost ground in that regard. And in 2018, which was last year, the economy grew 4.1%, while in the fourth year of President Jagdio in 2004, it only grew 1.6%. So when you make this type of comparison, what you see is the economy doing far better than it ever did under a previous administration of President Jagdio, and yet people are out there trying to mislead Guyanese that this economy is not growing, that nothing is happening in this economy. It is actually growing.
And Mr. Lucas, I just want to interject there and pause because I know some people can spread propaganda. Just so you know, me passing this, I'm giving him his own article. For those of you who want to go look for it, comparing performance of two leaders of Guyana. So this is not information that I came here and gave to Mr. Lucas. He actually gave me the information. I just wanted to make that clear that and this table, as he said, came from the Bank of Guyana website, and again, it is part of an article that he himself wrote that was published in the Guyana Chronicle. I think it is. Continue, sir.
That's correct. Now, but here's the thing about it. People, seem to be knocking President Granger about the performance of the economy, in spite of how well it has done under his leadership. But prior to 2001, President Jagdio was in office as president. He wasn't elected then. It was thrust upon him in 1999. And in spite of having 2 years practice, in spite of having 2 years to understand what the office of the president is, he was unable in his first 4 years as an elected leader to do anything better than President Granger has done.
Okay.
And may I remind you, in 2005, you had a flood in this country.
Yes.
You had a serious flood in this country. This is 2019. The only thing you have is a lot of noise coming from some sections.
Some sections, yes.
Of the country, trying to disrupt the economic progress of the country. So, I think it's important. I'm glad you really raised this matter, to let people understand. And if people really want to, see the evidence, there's another table in the Bank of Guyana report that talks about indices of output for selected commodities. And it gives you all the agricultural commodities, the manufacturing commodities, and so forth. And you will see the extent to which some of these things have grown significantly under this administration, under the Granger administration. In some instances where, for example, plantains might have been growing at, 20-30% under the PPPC administration, it actually grew over 1,000% under the Granger administration. There are a number of commodities like that, but I guess people don't always take the time to go and read these things and to try and understand what is happening. But it is important for them to appreciate that the amount of work that this administration has done in order to reposition this economy to achieve the kind of results that it has been able to achieve without the impact of oil and gas as yet on the economy is phenomenal. So I think it's very important that people understand that. And there was another article that had actually done talking about the repositioning of Guyana, where we looked at the productive capacity of the country. Now, the productive capacity of a country is the kind of assets that you have that will enable you to produce more goods and services for the people. In other words, it will enable you to grow the economy. So the higher your productive capacity is the more that you can do. Because if you think of somebody who wants to start a hire car business, if you buy one car, then at least it's only so much you can do. But if you add 2 or 3 cars, you are increasing your productive capacity, and therefore you can grow your business much faster than if you just remained with 1 car. There was a graph that I put in an article that showed that under the PPPC, the productive capacity of Guyana actually declined from about 51%, which is where Desmond Hoyt left it, the late Desmond Hoyt left it, down to about 20-something% by the time the PPPC had left office. It's only now that President Granger has begun to push it back up. And I think up to last year at least, it had reached the same level at which President Jagan had gotten it back up to by the time he would have departed office. So, I think it's important for people to really, listen carefully to what is being said and to understand that a lot of what is being said is not necessarily accurate.
Accurate, right.
And, only last week I think I did an article.
Yes, I know. You had to respond.
I had to debunk some things that somebody was peddling out there about the economy, simply because what they did was they took the wrong table to discuss real GDP. They took the wrong table. And so I thought it was important because, at the end of the day, our children read the papers.
Exactly. And I know Mr. Lucas is not going to do this because that is not his mandate here today. And I've been talking about the media and the misinformation being peddled. In this case, I'm going to say that the article to which he refers, and I read the article and I also read his debunking of some of the statements. The article in which he refers to it was in the Guyana Times. And, some of us know what we get from certain newspapers and even television stations, unfortunately. But what he is saying here is very correct. Our children also read, indeed, and we can't be, putting the wrong information there for them to read. Unfortunately, our time has come and gone. And viewers, we could have discussed so much more. There's a lot. In just about 1 minute, I just want to give you an opportunity, though, in terms of closing off on the note of the economy. In 1 minute, what should, and this is your take, what should Guyanese expect with what everybody's calling now an oncoming oil economy? What should we be looking forward to? What are some of the things that we should be doing as Guyanese preparing to head into an oil economy?
Well, the only thing I would tell people is to make sure that they have the right kind of training.
Okay.
So make sure that you take a look at your skill sets and see if you are ready to participate in the oil economy itself or in those industries that will be influenced by the oil economy, which will of course include our hospitality industries, our construction industry, our transportation industry, and so forth. You have to make sure that you have the resources that would enable you to take advantage of the opportunities that would come. Of course, food is a major area as well, because my anticipation is that the population will grow as a result of the economic fortunes that Guyana was likely to experience, and people will need food always. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Of course, viewers, unfortunately or fortunately, we are out of time. Those of you who are now joining, yes, this is Rawle Lucas. He is the chairman of GPL's board. In the beginning of the program, the first half of our program was actually dedicated, and he went beyond just half hour. That was dedicated to talking about not only the problems of GPL, but the solutions, things that he and his team have already begun. So we expect to see those changes. I mean, I know as Guyanese, we're so impatient. And when it comes to GPL, and this is no offense to Mr. Lucas, but we have a right to be. But I trust that you listened carefully to everything that he said, and that, again, when we're not in the system, we don't understand what's happening. So now you can have just a little more, I'm asking for, a little more tolerance with GPL, and I myself have to look in the mirror and ask the same question to have some tolerance with them. So those of you who missed that conversation, you missed the information that he shared about GPL, before the end of the day, maybe in another 2 hours, this program will be, as usual, like every other program, loaded to my YouTube channel and Facebook page, so you can go there and hear the facts and hear the truth. Also, for those of you who are just this minute joining, you missed him briefly as he possibly could, with the time that he had analyzing Guyana's economic growth in the last 4 or 5 years. And again, too, that was really sensible information, and these are the facts. I don't come here, and the people who come on this program, the guests who come here, don't come and sit and push propaganda, regardless of which political side of the aisle they're on. They come and they give you the facts, and I try to keep it that way, because we have enough negative rhetoric and enough misinformation swimming around the place, so we try to do it right here. Again, unfortunately, we are out of time. Not sure who we're going to have on the program next week. I'm trying to work along with the Child Protection Agency there of the Ministry of Social Protection, because they've been doing a lot to protect our children. So we're going to try to get, if not Miss Anne Green herself, but a representative from that agency next week to come and talk to you. It's all about development and positivity on our program, especially in a season where we're going to be seeing and hearing so much more negatives. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have with you. Once again, thank you very much to Mr. Rawle Lucas for coming on and sharing with us and sharing with the entire public. I always urge you to be good Guyanese citizens. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I am Malika Ramsey, and this has been Facing the Nation. Thanks for watching.